Inside this barn are just a few of my nightmares. Today I'm going to tell you a scary story like no other. This is the 456 horror story. It all began in the year 2018, and despite buying a Ferrari with just 18,000 miles, the car quickly became one never-ending nightmare of problem after problem. Here's the story of what happened to me and many other 456 owners. In the mid-90s, the Ferrari 456 was the flagship V12 model in Ferrari's lineup, and 30 years ago, this car cost a whopping £200,000. But anyone who bought one rapidly started to suffer with 456 nightmares. You see, the 456 suffered with so many common problems that the prices rapidly devalued. So when I picked up this 456 project at a tenth of its original value, I assumed I had got myself an absolute bargain. Well, unfortunately not, because bargain Ferraris are typically cheap for a very good reason. Let me enlighten you on just some of the problems that this 456 came with. The biggest one of all was to do with the windows. Now I'm going to give you a live demonstration here. We're going to put the window up, and I want you to watch the gap here at the front and the gap here at the back. Let's go up. I don't know how well you can see this on the camera. We've got a gap at the front there, but at the back here, look at this. I can put my finger through there still. It's that bad. And believe it or not, this is actually quite good for a 456 window. Now, Ferrari were well aware of this problem, but did they issue a service recall to fix it? Nope. If you were under warranty and shouted loud enough, they would sort it out for you. But if you weren't, well, that was going to cost you about £10,000. And then there were electrical gremlins in their masses. Now, at the time, the 456 was quite advanced.
After all, we're only human, right?
Well, it really did suffer from that. Now, when lights flicker on and off in a room, many people believe it's the supernatural trying to communicate. Well, with the amount of lights flickering on and off on this 456 dash, it must be possessed. Perhaps it's Enzo himself telling me how annoyed he is for what I did with this car. Now, despite the 456 being one of the cheapest Ferraris you could buy today, the prices are anything but cheap. Let me give you some examples. So this front bonnet, the hood, last time I checked, £10,000. On the front here, we got two side lights, no longer available, but when you could get them, were again thousands of pounds. Worse still, inside the car, suffer because the window gaps, we get water in them. You've got an ECU in either side door. Those get water ingress and they blow up. And when you could get them, again, you can't get them anymore. I think the last time I checked, £5,000 a side. And to put that into some kind of cost perspective, if I bought myself a new bonnet, two new side lights and two window ECUs with that, the price would be pretty much double what I paid for this entire car. You know what the other weird thing is about this 456? Every time I'm in it, I get this strange feeling that I'm being watched. But today we're back on the 456 and I'm going to start to fix some of those problems, because once that's done, we're going to be selling this car to fund some parts for the future project. Priority number one is I have an overheating issue, which means I can't even use the car or even run it up for more than a minute without this happening. My concern is I can see steam coming out the front here, out the back there and out the side there. So potentially we've got more than one leak here. Now it could just be the way that that steam is finding its way out from underneath this plenum chamber, but we really are going to have to dig deeper into there And as you can see, there is really nothing I can do. I'm going to start stripping this off, but I'm going to get my scope cam down there and see if we can get a bit of a clearer picture of what's happening underneath there. So I'm going to be using this cool little scope cam here. Now let's set it up quickly. Now this is brilliant. It's saved me so many times. We've got this lovely long lead here and this bit that we can just bend and manipulate. But the cool thing is it's also got different, if I press the button behind here, I can change the views. I think it's got, yeah, there you go. I can put a light on it. It's got 2 or 3 different views. So yeah, 3 different views. So let's get it in the car and see how bad this thing is. So I fired up the V12 and waited for it to get warm. And it didn't take too long before I started to hear the hissing steam noises, but I still couldn't see where it was coming from. The signs were visible that there had definitely been water in the area, but at the moment nothing was coming out of the pipework. The temperature gauge on the 456 crept up to dangerous levels, and then I could hear the steam start to get even worse. Suddenly, water started to pour from the front hose, which meant my worst fears had come true. We were going to have to strip off the complete top of the engine in order to somehow attack the leak. This required a ton of parts, wiring and the complete plenum chamber to be removed in order to get to the hoses which were sat on the top of the block. Covers off, then all 12 injector connectors, throttle bodies and wiring were first to go. Batteries all disconnected. Now we're gonna just do the fuel rails here, although they're extremely tight. Taking no risks, I decided to label up all 12 of the connectors so we didn't get anything mixed up. Next up is the 2 fuel rails. I started to remove this one already. Main reason for this is actually just some access to get the nuts, which are right down there, holding all of that plenum chamber down onto the block. I'm going to pull the rail all up in one go. It's a little bit tight there. There we go. With the fuel rails out the way, it was now time to tackle the plenum chamber. Now with the weight of it and the bad angle, I really didn't want to risk my back, so I decided to stand on the engine and attempt to remove it. Not a very simple job as a one-man band. That didn't quite go to plan. We need another one of those. That's brittle, totally brittle, just literally broke off. All right, let's try again. This is the most sketchy thing ever. Attempt number 2 led to success. No damage to my back and no damage to the plenum chamber. A quick cleanup to remove all the loose dirt, debris and flaky paint was essential. All right, so my problem is, get a screwdriver, this tiny little one here. That's where I can see the water coming from. You can see all the dried water there sitting on top of the engine there. But also, if you have a look at this one here, look at the state of that. It's there, all the way here and all the way at the back. But I can't figure out where this one goes at the moment. It runs down around the back of the engine. Down there somewhere. So once I've figured out what it is, where it goes to, we're going to replace that and probably this one as well. I'm going to take no chances. Okay, so we've started to protect everything, started to clean it all up. I've vacuumed all of the loose bits, but we're going to have a good little scrub down there on the block. The only issue is this big one that sits here. It's got a part number on it. That part number, 181599. Made in England, funny enough. That is an original Ferrari part. Now, you're not going to believe that little bit of hose, which is looking disgusting. We're going to have to give this a whole flush out. That is £190, so with tax, that's about 250 quid. You're not going to get much change from that, which is ridiculous. I'm going to replace it, but I really don't want to pay that for it. Then we got this hose here. This was the one that was split and leaking. You can really see how nasty that is. Literally has disintegrated as I was trying to remove it. So that one, that's about £7 for Ferrari, and you can see really before it all broke apart, it was swelling quite badly there. And then another one that was also leaking is one at the back here, and the same thing happened. As soon as I started to take it apart, it disintegrated. Look at the state of that. Now, Ferrari don't have one of these for a left-hand drive car, which this is. You can see the steering wheel there. They do have a right-hand drive version. It's £17, and this thing looks like it's got some kind of, I don't know, some protection around it. It's got metal in there, like a metal sleeve. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to Ferrari to get at least a small pipe, and we can compare the length just to see if it's a difference between left and right. If the right-hand drive is longer, I can just trim it down. So let's see what we can do. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is certainly not the only 456 to have suffered with electrical problems. It really did plague the 456 model since it was first launched. Now, last week, I had the pleasure of a private behind-the-scenes tour at Eurospares. Really, really cool. I'll put the link to the video on their channel. It's up there or over there. But one of the things I discovered was rather shocking. They have a 456 in for break-in, and, well, it's quite unbelievable. Check it out. This is a very special room at Eurospares that not many people get to see. It's where all the chassis come once they have been fully stripped of all the parts. It's also a room that has several rare brand new chassis from the likes of a 430 Scuderia, a 550 Barchetta, a 575 Super America, to name a few. I like to call it the graveyard and the birthing zone at the same time. There's a Dino chassis, a Testarossa, anything from old to modern 488. But at the back of the room is something that I've come to see. A 456M. The M was the later model released a few years after mine, and it has some modifications. However, this 456, like many others, has suffered the common problem of countless electrical gremlins. So much so that despite the Ferrari not having a dent or scratch on the bodywork, a near perfect interior, and an engine that looks far nicer than mine, well, this 456 has been bought for a fraction of its true value due to the owner having spent so much money trying to repair electrical issues. It got to the point where the value versus repair cost was no longer financially viable. So this 456 will suffer the sad fate of being broken up into parts to give life to other suffering 456s. And that, my friends, is how bad it can get sometimes with 456 horror stories.
You know what, every time I move this car, something else breaks. Remember last week when we used a Giraffe jet wash to clean this car? Guess what happened?
There's another problem.
Door on the 456 refused to remain shut. Having a quick look around, it looked like the lock was jammed, so we just put a bit of lubrication in there. Unfortunately, this one was a cheap fix. With this week's Ferrari shopping trip complete, I managed to surprise myself by finding a replacement top hose for a fraction of the price that Ferrari wanted from a reseller. I also added to my list a couple of new gaskets, the broken plastic T-piece, 2 other hoses, and a water pump belt along with a thermostat O-ring as a precaution. But check this out, look how weak that hose was. It's no wonder I had leaks all over the place. It was time to start putting everything back together. We've cleaned up all of those 12 ports, ready for a gasket on that side, but we've also put in 1, 2, 3 new hoses. So all the hoses in this area have been replaced. I've also just given the top of the block a little bit of a clean up, got rid of all of the gunk that I can get to. And final thing, gasket on that side, and then we can start putting this bike together.
One eternity later.
With everything reassembled, I then added coolant and fired up the engine with my fingers firmly crossed. Now, despite having a Christmas tree of lights here on the dash, the gauges are alright. So far, so good. Sounds sweet. Just got to keep an eye on this one. Obviously the car is stationary, so that's not going to help, but I want to hear the fans kick in at the front and I'm going to be happy. By now the car would 100% have overheated. We would be seeing steam coming out, so really good sign right now. But like everything else with this car, it didn't quite go to plan. A short while later I inspected the engine bay and I could see steam coming from the coolant reservoir. I then inspected underneath the car and sure enough I could see fluids pouring out. That's not so good. Now I think part of the problem was I didn't hear the fan kick in under here, and well, it's not maintaining temperatures, so that's the next thing to look at. Why is the fan not kicking in? I then went off, had a cup of tea and some lunch, let the car cool down, and then I whipped off the covers for the water pump at the front of the car. I just wanted to make sure, peace of mind, that I actually had a belt there that was circulating all of the fluids around the engine block. Before we go any further, I'm going to run some simple checks with the fuse board, checking all the fuses and relays.
I actually just found 3 blown fuses on the board. I've replaced them, but none of them were anything to do with the cooling system, unfortunately. So we're going to go underneath. Look at that. Even my horse doesn't want to stay upright. I don't know if that's broken. That's probably like 300 quid. Anyway, we're going to go underneath here, have a look at the wiring and also the sensor on the radiator.
Okay, so the next test is all to do here at the bottom of the radiator underneath the car. We've got our temperature sensor down there, and if this is not working, the fans won't kick in. So what we're going to do with this is bypass it. I've taken off the cable, I've jumpered the 2 connections, and if this works, what we'll see is the fans kick in and stay on permanently. So let's just have a look and see what happens. Actually, this is the fix I've currently got working, or I've had for years on my Ratarossa. My fans are on constantly and it keeps the car always cool. All right, so by turning the ignition on without even starting the car, we should hear the fans kick in. And there you go. I've got some cool breeze coming in this way. You can hear them both working. So that is our fix. We have a sensor that has gone wrong. Perfect. Well, that saves a lot of bother. I then fired up the car, let it run for a long time, kept my eye on all of the gauges, and finally we had rectified the problem. Only thing I needed to do was jump in the car once again, head down to Ferrari and pick up another sensor. All right, we've been to Ferrari. I've got myself a new sensor to fit to the car, along with a few other bits that we're going to be fitting down there to sort out this overheating problem once and for all. We're going to do that in the next video, along with a load of other issues like the wiring, because we've got a few of those problems. But before we go, I would like to ask you guys a bit of advice. You saw the coolant that came out of this car. It wasn't looking too pretty. So I would love to be able to flush this system and do it really successfully, so it's clean as a whistle in there. But I'm not exactly sure how to do that. If anyone's got any good recommendations, please do drop them in the comments below. Got to say a massive thank you, because all of those suggestions really do help me. In the last video, we talked about the shielding on the BBI over that starter motor lead.
I got so many really cool suggestions on that, and it really was very helpful. So thank you very much, guys. Now I've got a long list of problems to rectify on this 456 before we can answer the ultimate question. Can I bring this Ferrari back to the land of living, or is it destined for a journey to the afterlife? It's getting late around here, guys, and I really don't like being here when it's dark because all kinds of strange things start to happen. So I'm going to shut up shop and head off home. See you in the next one.